Both of these Samsung phones are the exact same price. One is a brand new budget phone and the other is a premium flagship from 3 years ago. So which one's actually the better buy? Is the old flagship chip still faster? How do the cameras compare? And which one will last longer once you buy it? I've been thinking about this for a while, and originally I was just going to review this. This is the Galaxy A17, a $200 phone, but then it got me wondering, like, if I was going to spend $200, would I actually spend it on this, or would I rather buy a used flagship phone? And it turns out the S23, I found it on Amazon for $203. This is a refurbished one, and I bought it to see what the damage was actually going to be like and how these phones could actually compare in terms of speed, cameras, and the overall experience. So in this video, I'm gonna go through these as like a pro-con, and talk about the wins for each of these phones and how they compete overall. So let's start off with the first win for the Galaxy A17. Even though we're looking at slightly different sizes here, you can note that you're able to get the S23 Plus, you can see right here, and it's gonna be maybe an extra $30 to $50 if you wanted that larger size, but for the sake of having the same exact price, I'm gonna go with the S23, a slightly smaller phone, and with that, you're getting a significantly smaller battery. So the new phone here, the A17, has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, while the old one was 3,900. That aside, the new one also has a slightly weaker processor, which means you're probably gonna be drawing less power. You should be getting a slightly better battery life on the A17. That, in addition to any used phone you're buying, because this phone has been around for a while, somebody has probably been using it for a little while, that means the battery might not be at 100% capacity anymore. When you fully charge it, you might not be getting the same battery life you would have when this phone was brand new. Fortunately, you can actually check this if you go into Samsung Members app, and they don't really tell you as much as I would like, but if you go to battery status here, it just says battery life is good. It doesn't say exactly what percent battery health I'm at, but nonetheless, the battery life on this does seem to be pretty decent. Also, the diagnostics, I skipped a bunch of them just to get through that quicker, and the only one that was not acceptable right now is the system software. I have to update this, and I will do that a little bit later. First of all, you have an IP68 water and dust resistance on the S23, while the A17 is still respectable at IP54, but definitely on the low end. You're not going to be, I would not want to dunk this underwater, and I'd be a little bit more careful about getting this near any kind of dust and water like that. You also have a glass back and aluminum rails on the S23, which again feels more premium in the hand, and then you have pretty much all plastic here on the A17. Some people like plastic because it's a little bit more crack proof, but the plastic is often easier to scratch in my experience, and it's generally going to be viewed as a less premium device. That said, maybe you're gonna get a case and maybe it doesn't really matter. A big win for the Galaxy A17, a little bit of a caveat with this one, is the support. So this is a brand new phone. Samsung promises 6 years of support and 6 generations of OS upgrades. The S23 only got 4 years of OS updates when it was new and 5 years of security. Now that this is 3 years old, that means the S23 will be out of date and unable to get Android in about 2028. Realistically though, most apps will still work on this phone for a little while after that, and let's say you could realistically use the S23 until about 2029. The A17 is technically still supported until, you could say probably about 2023 is when it's going to not really run as well, but that is going to be very dependent on, do you think these phones will actually last until 2028, 2029, or 2032? And when you're looking at that, obviously the speed is going to be a big question there. And that is a huge reason why I would be tempted to lean towards the S23 in this comparison. And if you look at these, you have a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, the processor on the S23, versus an Exynos 1330 on the A17. If we do a little speed test here, just some basic app operations, I'm gonna open up Chrome, I'm gonna find some photos, I'm gonna download these photos, and maybe I wanna make them my wallpaper. You can see through all of that, the S23 is significantly faster. And then an even more smoking gun test here is going to be a video export. So I downloaded CapCut, and then I just exported, I kind of adjusted the video in some way that would make it take a little while to export, and I exported on both of them. It took a couple seconds on the S23 and took maybe 4 to 5x as long on the A17. Without a doubt, that is a landslide win for the S23. And based on that testing, I would strongly suspect the S23 will actually outlive the A17 in its usable lifespan, despite having less of a software support window. That said, everyone has their own patience. Some people are okay with slower phones, and maybe the A17 could last longer. The S23 also wins again with some of the other features on here. So this has wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, where the A17 does not have reverse or regular wireless charging. And for anyone who hasn't used it before, reverse wireless charging just means I could charge my earbuds on the back or my watch, or I could charge another phone on the back, and you're just transferring your battery power to something else. It's not always something I use often, but it's nice to have that in a pinch. The S23 also has Samsung DeX. I made a full video about that, but it's kind of a cool hidden feature where if you plug in your phone to any kind of display, whether that is a projector, a TV, a monitor, you're able to get a full desktop interface. And it's kind of a nice way to use it as a laptop in a pinch. All right, you see this right here? This is another downside of getting an older phone. This is the third update I had to get in a row, and I'm sure there's gonna be more. It's kind of annoying it doesn't just have one bulk update, it just updates and immediately starts another update and then another update. And so I hope this is the last one, but I'm just gonna schedule the install for later just so I can actually continue filming this video. It's constantly asking me to update. But again, once you're up to date, that should never be a problem again. Aside from the updates, again, once you have it fully updated, that should never be an issue again. But getting back to the features of the S23, being a former flagship phone, the features that has that the A series does not, one of them, as you can see right here, is the always on display. It's a little tough to see on camera, but basically, if you go into your settings, you'll see, I'll show on both of them, the always on display does exist for the S series, but it does not exist for the A series. Not everyone cares about that, but again, you're gonna have a stack of features like that that are existing on the flagship, the S23, but not the A series. There's also some Galaxy AI type features, that translation and generative photo editing and stuff like that. I wouldn't really worry as much about those because you could just download the Gemini or ChatGPT app and you would get probably a better experience like that anyway. But talking about that, there's a huge advantage to the A17. A refurbished phone such as this S series here is definitely a gamble. Now, I feel like I got pretty lucky here, but when you're buying this, I bought this on Amazon, and you had 3 different options. You could buy good, fair, or acceptable. I bought the lowest quality one because I wanted to see, first of all, it was a perfect price match at $200, and second of all, I wanted to see what that would actually mean. So looking at this, we've got a little bit of cosmetic damage on the outside of the aluminum rail. I'll get some close-up B-roll to show you exactly what that looks like, but just some basic little dings. If you put a case on it, you would never know the difference with that. But the hidden gamble is, I don't know what the former owner did with this phone. I don't know if it was exposed to a lot of heat or a lot of cold temperatures. I don't know if they were really aggressive with the USB Type-C port, and maybe eventually anything like that is going to get damaged. Or maybe the IP rating on here, the IP68 rating, the seals might be a little bit more worn. They might be kind of damaged, and it might not be as waterproof as it says it should be. No matter what, this is not a brand new phone, and you don't get the warranty with that. And so being about a 3-year-old phone, there's going to be a gamble with this. In this situation, I think it turned out pretty good. I'm not worried about this, and I think that this phone seems to be in great condition. However, I'll talk more about warranty in a minute, but another feature that's different on these is the A series, as you can see, has a side fingerprint sensor. Some people really like that on the button right there, so you just press it, that wakes it up, and it turns it on. The S series, you just tap your thumb in the middle, and that signs in. I find the ultrasonic fingerprint sensor in the S series is much faster, very reliable, and I like it quite a bit. But again, just, 2 sides of the same coin there. You'll also notice that the display is significantly better on the S23 compared to the A17. So the A17 is a fairly large display. It's 90 Hz refresh rate, which is fairly fast, but it doesn't feel nearly as fast, maybe because of the processor, maybe because you have 120 Hz, but it doesn't feel nearly as fast as the S23 here. And that's not something that you're really going to capture on camera, because I'm filming this in 30 Hz and looking at 90 or 120 is not going to be captured on that. The S23 also gets brighter, but I have to say, for $200, a brand new phone, the display is actually very impressive on this A series here. You're not only getting a lot of good colors on here, you're getting a pretty fast display, you're getting a really impressive brightness, and the only downside that you can really notice side by side, besides, a slightly less colorful and bright display, is the bezels all the way around. They're not really symmetric, so a little bit larger on the bottom and definitely thicker all the way around with that kind of U-shaped cutout for the camera versus a hole punch as you see here. But a big win for the A series is that the A17 has expandable storage in the SD card slot. So if you buy this phone and you're like, you know what, I really wish I had more storage for photos, you can add that with a very affordable SD card putting it in there. Now I think it's time we get into a camera test. Before we show them side by side, I want to just take a look at the A series. This is the new phone, of course. The camera, when you give it enough light, actually does a pretty good job. And I'll show these on screen, but like I've got a photo of my parents' cat. I was hanging out with them, and I mean, in the right light, this looks really sharp. Good color, very saturated, very vibrant, and pretty good sharpness and detail on everything. I was definitely impressed with that. Similarly, if I go outside, a lot of contrast here, very bright snow. The trees are a lot darker. The sky is probably oversaturated in my opinion here, but I mean, it's kind of a pretty decent photo. I think this is very much a usable camera, and it's impressive that at the $200 entry price point, you're getting a decent camera in most, easy camera settings like that. Once you get to the tougher settings, that's where you really see the difference, and I think it's time to actually show a comparison here between these two phones' cameras. So starting off with just like a little still life shot here, you're getting much better color and much better resolution on the S23, which is no surprise. If we go to the ultra-wide lens, they're not really like that different. Ultra-wide, you're never gonna have like a ton of detail in there anyway, but again, significantly better for sure on the S23, but I mean, I think both are definitely usable. Once we start to zoom in, you get a huge difference because, I mean, megapixels aside, I don't really care as much about megapixels. You have a telephoto lens on the S23, whereas you don't have that on the A17. The A17, the third lens is actually a macro lens, and I'll take a look at that in a second, but once you zoom into 3x or even 10x, you'll see an enormous difference. Just looking at this clock right here, the numbers are just so much more readable and sharp on the S23. The front-facing camera, they both like to do a little bit of processing, so if you turn all of that off and they don't try to smooth your face out or anything, you're gonna have subtle differences. You can leave a comment and let me know which one you think looks better. I think, again, it's not surprising the S23 should be higher quality here. And then going back to the rear lens, if you're looking for a bokeh or separation, that natural blur in the background of a photo, you're gonna get a better experience with that on the S23 here, as you're looking at this little fake lavender plant. Still not perfect if you zoom in on it, but I mean, I still think that looks a lot better. The S23 does not have a macro lens, nor does it have a macro capability, so some flagship phones, you can use the ultra wide as a macro lens. That doesn't exist on the S23. So if you hold it up close, you get this blurry shot right here, whereas the A17, you're able to use a macro shot, which sounds great until you realize you could just use the telephoto lens on the S23, and yeah, it's definitely better. We'll get into a video test next, but something to note is the S23, you can shoot in 4K on the front and 4K on all the rear lenses, or you can shoot in 8K on the rear lens as well, so you can get a much higher resolution, where the A17 is limited to 1080p on all lenses. So this is a front-facing video test. Wow, the difference is wild. Look at that contrast on the A17, and look at that smoothing on the S23. So you can let me know which one you think looks better. The A17 is only filming in 1080p. This is also a microphone sample, so you can hear the A17. And then this is the S23 filming in 4K. Let's flip around and see the rear lenses now. All right, rear video test on both of these. Limited to 1080p on the A17. You can see the noise and the grain in that corner, while the colors look much more natural on the S23. It's kind of a low light right now. It's about sunset. This wall is actually kind of like a seafoam bluish green, I think is what they call it. So that looks much more accurate on the S23. I don't hate the colors on the A17. They did a pretty okay job, but without a doubt, this has to be a win for the S23. Also, let's check out the zoom. So if we zoom out to, let's see, ultra wide. So you have kind of a steady zoom on the S23 and it just jumps for the A17. There is no 0.6x, it just goes, 0.5 to 1. And you can have a gradual zoom on the S23. You can also zoom in up to 10x versus 30x. And if we go to 12x. If we go to 10, I mean, you could tell me which one you think looks better. Now, of course, the warranty. I talked about that before. That's a huge win for the A17. One of the biggest reasons I would maybe recommend the 17 over the 23, and that is because you're getting a 12-month warranty when you're buying this new. I'm not a big warranty guy, but if you're spending, your hard-earned money, $200 on this, and you're buying something that is kind of a gamble, then I mean, you could really be persuaded to say, maybe it's better to buy something new. If anything goes wrong in the next 12 months, you're able to get that fixed and or get it replaced, if necessary. Whereas depending on where you're buying a used phone, that just might not be the case at all. So my conclusion between these phones, it's always a bit of a risk to be buying a used phone. So if you have experience buying used phones, definitely leave a comment below. I would love to hear your stories if you had a good experience, bad experience, and maybe where you bought the phone. But personally, if I could find a reputable source to sell me an S23, I would much prefer it to the A17. The build is higher quality, the cameras are far superior, the phone is much more performant, and there are tons of additional features on there, like always on display, DeX, wireless charging, and things like that. This was once an $800 flagship just 3 years ago. That said, if you prefer something a little bit safer, you want something new, was never owned by somebody else, and you want peace of mind knowing that you have that 12-month warranty, the A17 can definitely make sense. Just know the cameras are definitely a bit more limited. They're gonna do a great job in very bright, well-lit environments, but when you're in darker environments, when you're zooming in, when you're doing things like that, you're gonna find the limit of this camera fairly quickly. And the only real complaint I have is that the processor does feel a bit slow. But if you're patient and you're okay with that, it's definitely a usable phone. So let me know which one you would buy and why. Thanks for watching. I'm Mike O'Brien, and I'll see you in the next video.